What's up, guys? How we doing? So I did an interview with Jason Thomas, not Jason Thomas. It's on NBC. The mechanic, the former suspension guy, and now actually owns his own suspension company, Jason Thomas. Man, he told a lot about what happens behind the scenes. Sometimes when I interview these guys, I don't know them that well and I don't know how it's going to go. Damn, this one went really good. I thoroughly enjoyed chatting with Jason Thomas. He had a lot of good information and he was willing to share it. And after you watch it, he talked about a rider and their parents doing something ridiculous. I got more information on that and I'll drop that tomorrow. I'll run through the sponsors here real quick. Nano-Xtreme, gosh, they're awesome. Pain cream works so good. Complete Racing Solutions. I haven't picked the winner for the year-long membership. I'll do that and have that on tomorrow's video. Ride Strapped, goggles, glasses, shirts. Precision Transport, the best shipment company out there. And Alias MX. You bought them out of motocross gear, but they still have cycling gear. All right, guys, without further ado, here's Jason Thomas.
You need people like me so you can point your fucking fingers and say, that's the bad guy.
All right, guys, so I have the original Jason Thomas, JT Money, but not the one that's on TV. What's happening, brother?
Hey, Chris, how's it going, man? Thanks for having me on.
Of course. Yeah, we got a mutual friend. And he's like, hey, you got to talk to this Jason Thomas guy. And it's not the one you normally know. But apparently you've been around the industry. You do suspension and you just moved to Southern Utah?
Yeah, I just first week in the shop here, just trying to get all set up. And just get my name out. And I appreciate the opportunity to get on here.
Yeah, no problem. What's the name of your suspension place?
It's MX Trans Suspension Service. And we're in Hurricane, Utah, like a brand new business complex.
How did you get into this sport? So, everyone wants to say, oh, I'm an expert at this, expert at that. You clearly have a background in it. Where did you start in the sport? Were you a racer and then turn mechanic? Where did it go? Where did it come from?
So started out in Seattle, Washington, and just started racing pretty late, actually, like 19 years old is when I started racing motocross. And just didn't have, like back when I was a kid, we didn't have the money when bikes broke down to take them to the bike shop. So I would just open the manual and just kind of figure stuff out. And then it kind of turned into like an ego thing. Like even with my cars, my dirt bikes, like I would just be proud of like never having to take it to a shop. I just figure stuff out, engines, transmission, like whatever it was, and just kind of turn into a pretty well-rounded mechanic, welder and stuff. And moved to Southern California in 2004. And I moved there to race. I had all these dreams to race pro and all that, and I was meant to be a mechanic, so that didn't really work out.
A lot of us don't have the skill. I had that dream too, and it didn't quite work out. So you moved to Southern California. When did you decide to make that full-time switch from racing to being a mechanic?
So when I went to California, got a job at RG3 with Rob hired me down there, and I was still trying to race, and they actually kind of helped me while I was working there, which was pretty cool. I took the RG3 box fan to a few supercrosses and just trying to qualify and do that whole thing. But a position opened up about 2 years after I started, what they call it the factory services rep. And I basically would travel to all the supercrosses, outdoor nationals, and I'd help Rob service suspension and all the stuff for all the pro riders. At the time it was like Brock Hepler and Ryan Dungey. His first year I was one of the guys. Nick Way, like a lot of guys, and it was kind of a door that opened up to like just a lot of different teams and opportunities. So
how far did you make it in your racing career? You said you went to Supercross? Did you qualify?
No, I never qualified. I never qualified Supercross, and I was just one of those guys that like, what's that guy doing out there kind of deal in Supercross. Outdoors was a different story. Like I was a little bit better, and actually some of the guys that would qualify, I would beat them outdoors. But I only rode West Coast races. And back then, I think there's an 80-man cap now at the races. Back then, it was just like whoever signs up. And I remember my first national at Glen Helen, there were 122 guys trying to qualify to a 40-man show. And that was just like me being from Washington, you go down and get into that mess. It was gnarly. Like you're going as fast as you can go, and guys are blown by you like you're nobody. And it's a humbling experience.
Oh, believe me, I tried to qualify in 07 at Glen Helen, and I made it about a lap and a half before I broke my foot. And the same thing. I remember seeing those big jumps at Glen Helen and just being like, what the hell am I doing?
Yeah. I remember I remember at '07 Glen Helen, there was a huge, massive double, right, coming down in the infield. I was like, because I was going to race that year, and they didn't accept my entry in '07. And I remember sitting there watching, just looking at it, going like, I don't think I would jump that.
I remember looking at it going, why am I here? And when my foot got broke, I broke it on one of the other jumps. I was actually thinking about that big one. And I'm like, you know what? Probably that's the last time I try it. That was stupid. Glad I got out of here with as minor injuries I did.
Yeah. And you see the guys, I mean, I don't want to bring up, everyone knows what's going on with Jerry Robin and, Joe Evans over the weekend in Australia. It's like, you see the guys that hang it out, man, and they're not getting rich doing what they do, but you just do it for the love of the sport. You know the risk, but it's tough.
Yes, it's very tough. So now you're at RG3 and you're you probably still ride, I'm sure. Obviously, that's your bike, right?
Yeah, that's my bike in the background. And yeah, I'm kind of one of the guys that won't give up. I just did a Loretta qualifier over the weekend, Delta, Utah, and gone to Loretta's. Like I did 2020, I went to Loretta's and keep getting hurt trying to go back, but eventually I'll get back there.
And yeah, Loretta's is a weird one, man. For me, it's just a money pit. If I was going to do it again, I'd probably try Mammoth and some of the other ones. I don't know that I would go to Loretta's.
Yeah, it was tough, especially from Seattle. Driving 35 hours to Tennessee was pretty gnarly. But personally, I think it was one of the funnest races I've ever been a part of. Just the way everything's ran and like the track was legit, but the ruts and stuff were tough. But like I just like tracks like that. So.
Oh yeah, and the atmosphere, you can't beat the atmosphere. Camping out, everybody's there. It's a really good time. It's something I would recommend everybody do at least once, but I don't know that I'd want to keep chasing it and dumping money.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you're going to the races with RG3. You've kind of accepted the dream's not going to happen. What's next?
So yeah, RG3, and I decided there was an opening at I don't know if people remember, there was like 3 or 4 Rockstar Suzuki teams. Bill's Pipes and WBR Suzuki started out. It was Kawasaki, then Suzuki, turned into Rockstar Suzuki in '07. And I got hired on, and immediately I was put on with Michael Byrne as his mechanic. And top 5 guy. This is like first year mechanic. I wasn't even really an engine builder yet, but we had an engine department, so I was able to make it work. And we had a pretty good Supercross season. And then from there, I mean, I have a collection of pit shirts. I went to MDK for that summer as their suspension guy. I actually worked for Kerry Hart as his mechanic on the Supermoto team before I went to Motocross and Supercross. And then from there, I was hired on at it was Motorsport Kawasaki, and it turned into Canada Kawasaki, then Rockstar Suzuki. That was all of Bobby Hewitt's, all the same team. And I was hired on as Tommy Hahn's mechanic, and where we had a pretty good 3 years.
How was it working for Bobby Hewitt? I know he's a good old boy, and if you do your job, you seem to get along with him really well. What was your experience working with Bobby?
Bobby, with my experience, he had a heart of gold, man. Like he just loved the sport. I think back then he kind of purchased or took over the team, because originally I think Motorsport Outlet owned the team. I can't remember the guy's the owner, Bill. I think can't remember his last name, but that team was going under, and Bobby came in and purchased the team. And I think he did it with the idea that Hunter, his son, was going to race. And he did. I was actually Hunter's mechanic for the first race in, I think it was Houston, Texas, where he got 7th, which is badass, I think shortly after that, he broke his femur, and he kind of had a tough go of it after that. But Bobby kept the team going, and yeah, he was awesome to work for.
So were you on the team the year that he basically told Anderson to go home and get in shape?
I actually left from there after I worked for Tommy for 3 years. I left and I actually went to a drag race team. I worked for on a Top Fuel car. And that year, I think it was 2011 was that year where he kind of pulled him off the bike and said, hey, you need to step it up. So. Okay,
so you're in the sport, you go drag racing. You make more money drag racing? What brought you back to motocross?
Just the love of motocross, honestly. Now I love drag racing too. I grew up with my dad going to the races and stuff, and it's still like that's something I recommend everyone goes to see a Top Fuel car run at least once in your life. It's pretty cool. And so the reason I ended up going is in '08 when the economy got pretty bad. Like the motocross was, like our team almost went under in 2010. They were able to pull a deal through with Suzuki, but it was the riders weren't getting bonuses, and there was kind of like, so the riders aren't getting bonuses and mechanics aren't getting bonuses. So you're living off a salary, which is not that much money, to be honest, not as much as people think. And so I got the opportunity to go drag racing, and before I knew it, 2 weeks later, I'm moving to Indiana and worked there for a couple of years. So, but then I got to Indiana, and there was no tracks, man. Like the closest track was like, I think it was called Haspin Acres, and it was an hour and a half away, and it was not that good. So,
Oh man, yeah. So I would think Midwest there's all that land. I would assume there's tracks all around there.
I thought so too. I didn't even really give it a second thought. And like, I mean, Redbud was about 3 hours away, which was one of the sickest tracks I've ever ridden. Like they do a really good job prepping that track, even on a practice day. But there was a track called Motoland that was there, but for some reason it was closed, and there just wasn't much going on. You had to drive pretty far to ride. And then the winter, like you're just not riding in the winter there.
No, those winters are nasty. They are very nasty. So,
Yeah.
so what team did you jump back with when you came to Supercross again?
So I remember I would keep in touch back then with Scuba Steve Westfall. He's Triumph team manager now. And one day I think we were in New Jersey, and I called him, or he called me, and he asked me how it was going. I was just kind of like, I don't know. And he's like, are you thinking about coming back? And I was just like, yep. And he literally is like, I'll let Bobby know. And it was just done deal. They sent me a contract. And so at the end of 2012, I was moving back to California, and just watching motocross on TV, I just felt like I belonged there, and wanted to come back. And like, I love California. I kind of miss being there. It's a little bit different now. We all know the politics and stuff there, but yeah, I just love being around the industry down there. So
Did you take a pay cut to come back to motorcycles?
I actually got to pay. Well, yeah, I took a pay cut because I basically, if you count my bonus money I was making drag racing, like, yeah, I made a pay cut because we had a pretty badass car. I worked for Antron Brown, Macro Tools, who I still talk to all those guys too. And we had won 12, in 11 and 12, we won 12 races. We set a world record, and we won the championship in 2012. So I can't think of anyone else that's won a championship in two different motorsports. It's pretty cool to say that,
That's really cool. Yeah. So now you're back in the sport, 2012. You're not working with Tommy Hahn anymore, because I think he kind of stepped away, right?
Yeah, he was Moto Concepts on that year, and he still did race. He raced for that Honda team. They're not around anymore. GPI, I think, or GPI Pumps or something like that. I can't remember the actual name of that team, but he was Tommy Hahn, Freddie Noren. And when I went back to Rockstar Suzuki, I was actually talking about going to be Millsap's mechanic, and Scuba Steve ended up working for Millsap's. And so when I came in, I was kind of a wild card. Long story short, Bobby needed an engine builder that he could trust. And they kind of pulled me aside one day, and they're like, hey, I know you want to be a mechanic, but we want you to build engines. And I became the engine builder for the team. Millsaps, Anderson, I think we had Nick Uizzi, and that's when Millsaps had that dream season in 2013. Like I think he had 2 or 3 race wins. He was on the podium almost every race, led the points for 8 rounds. Like, he was pretty unreal.
Yeah, he took that championship. He took Villapoto all the way to the end that year. I thought he almost got it done, man.
He did. I think he was good until, if I remember right, he went home. Like, he left California, went home back east, and he had a crash and he hurt his elbow or something like that. And that's when it kind of got tough for him. But he was legit that first half of the season.
Yeah, and I think something happened with his leg to where it broke, and then like where it broke, it was like sliding, and he had to get it redone after, and he just put up with it until the end of the season.
You're right. Yeah, he had to have his femur broke when he was at Honda, and I think he had to have it rebroken and like fixed, and he was out for the year.
That's nasty. The things we do in this sport, man, other people see it and they think we're nuts, and we are. So
yeah, it's like, I kind of made a comment over the weekend because I was up at Delta at the Loretta qualifier. The kid I was with, he got his name's Austin Lambaugh, and he got hit in the mouth with a big rock and broke his tooth in half. And I looked at his dad when he pulled in. I'm just like, man, this sport is stupid. Well, we love it, but it's just like, what are we doing?
Okay, well, that brings me to something. I've been pushing this for a long time, and I know that this isn't part of your interview, but I like to get educated people who've been around the sport and get your opinion. I want to see a spec tire. I want to see something like what they use in Europe on the Jeep, like the Enduros. You limit the knob height and make them closer together so it doesn't tear up the track as much. Why in the hell do we have to have these paddle tires that are throwing rocks, digging giant ruts, and then we're like, why doesn't the track hold up? What do you think of a spec tire?
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea because we've gotten to a place with this or place with this MX-14 tire that it's so good straight lined that everybody wants to run it for the start. But a lot of guys, you'll find that they don't like it on the track, but they feel like they have to run it to get that start. And I was talking to Austin's dad over the weekend after that happened. I'm just like, how have I been riding for 30 years and that has never happened? And that's probably a good point that you brought up, that tire. Like everyone's got those MX-14s on, and those things dig and they throw some dirt at you, especially on a 450.
Yeah, and if you go back and look at the races from the 90s and you go back on YouTube, you realize how much slower people are going. And the tracks, they didn't do near the maintenance. The Dirtworks crew is amazing how they can rebuild a track. They
Yeah.
didn't do that. The track didn't break down, and they're running the K490 Dunlops were, like a track tire. Like they didn't shred the tracks. And I'm like, it's pretty simple. You're never going to slow down a four-stroke, but if you take away traction, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree with that. And yeah, Dirtworks, going back to that point, they are amazing. I went to Seattle Supercross and we thought it was going to be a disaster. And I couldn't believe how good that track was. Like, I don't know what kind of magic they pulled, but they're pretty good at what they do.
So okay, so now you're back with factory. You're building motors for guys that's almost winning the championship. Where do you go from there? What happened in that program?
So, great team, but there was some dysfunction, I guess I would say. And I'd kind of been around for a while. I kind of had an ego and some other guys as well, and we kind of clashed. I ended up wanting to make a change, and I ended up. It's kind of funny because of my suspension background. I knew Shane Drew from Factory Honda, and just one day I just reached out and like, hey, you guys hiring? And he actually told me no at the time. But a week later, this is why you should always be persistent when you want something. A week later, I just sent a resume, just fired it off, just like, hey, you change your mind, let me know. Dan Bentley called me back 2 days later because their test mechanic was moving back to Japan and they needed a test guy in like a couple of weeks basically, and went in for an interview and got the job.
Wow. Yeah, always be persistent. I feel like there's this thing we can do. We can kind of manifest stuff. You start thinking about it, pursuing it. It's not like you just put a picture on the wall and wish for it. You got to take actions, but I feel like we can make stuff like that happen. That's a pretty cool way to end up at Factory Honda. How was that compared to some of these privateer teams?
So on the privateer teams, like we would just put bikes together, like Rockstar Suzuki, the candidate Kawasaki, you get parts from Pro Circuit, put stuff together. We had a pretty good bike. Like Tommy was able to win in '09 Steel City, won the last national, which is probably one of the best days I've ever had racing. But when you get to Factory Honda, I remember being so nervous. Like I emptied my toolbox, like washed all my tools and cleaned everything and organized everything. And when I got there, the team was a lot more laid back than I thought it would be, for one. But for two, you just realize how little you know about a chassis of a motorcycle. Like we did so much testing there, we could change rake angles. I don't want to talk too much about what they do, just out of respect. But rake angles, we were doing other stuff with the chassis and gussets in certain places that can completely change how the bike turns. We had unlimited options with linkages, lengths of shocks, like all kinds of stuff that we could do.
Length of shock?
The length of shock, like yeah, we were shortening shocks, so we actually had a shock that was a little bit longer. Like we were doing all kinds of stuff like that. And then I had the opportunity. We had what's called a CompuTrack there, where I could map out the chassis and basically map out all the points of like steering, rake, counter shaft, swing arm pivot, and everything, and just put the chassis together with all the dimensions. And you could see if you like raised or lowered the shock like a millimeter, how it would affect the whole motorcycle, and just stuff that you just have no idea,
Dang, yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, you get on these bikes and you think there's a lot of things to change, but when you get to Factory Honda, there are like, I think of it as just this bike and you can modify it, but you guys don't actually even have to modify. You can create.
Yeah, you're pretty limited. Like over here, like obviously in Europe, you can anything kind of goes, but here, like we have to run the standard frame, swing arm, but we could still, I think people do know it's out there that we can, the factory teams have offset steering head bearing raises and stuff like that, where we could actually change the rake angle a quarter of a degree, or I think up to a half degree, and just different options. So there's quite a bit of stuff, and also with all those options, you can also get into trouble really quick too by overthinking everything and trying too much. So
Well, and let's be honest, they've got those rules, but they're kind of guidelines. If you're not cheating, obviously, they don't do anything. And I
yeah,
promise, okay, you don't have to give any specifics, but you've seen it happen though, right? There's some rules that have been bent.
absolutely. Like more guys than you think are probably doing stuff that, I mean, yeah, they're pushing limits, but
Yeah, we're racers. That's what we do.
yeah, and that's it. Like rules are meant to be pushed.
And so how long did you stay with Honda? Walk me through how that went. And yeah, that's crazy. I'm sorry. I'm just still blown away by you telling me all the different things and all the research. That's why I don't know if you follow my stuff, but I laugh
I do. Yeah,
I laugh at Darren Lawrence thinking he's coming in telling these guys that have been researching this stuff at the highest level. These engineers have been working on millimeter here. This drag racer is going to come in and tell them how to do it. It just blows my mind, the ego on that guy. So sorry, my point. Don't you don't have to jump on that. But
yeah. I think the parents, it's tough because I think they come from a place where they really want the best for their kids, but sometimes it does. It's kind of like it's tough with the team. It's tough to kind of like the team's kind of in the middle, and sometimes you get parents that, if the team manager is not doing what they want, they go above his head, and, you get some of that stuff going on, and it creates a tough atmosphere. Everybody just wants the best.
do they really want the best for them, or is it an ego thing and they just want to be involved?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think everyone's got an ego, especially in the racing industry. That's one thing I do not miss, I guess, if there's one thing you could ask me, but
So let me ask you this. What's the craziest thing? Have you ever had like a parent, or you don't have to name names or anything? Have you ever had anyone come in with just a ridiculous idea on something you need to do for their kid on the bike, and you have the data that says it's not going to work, and you let them do it anyway just to show them how bad it is?
yeah. I had a parent tell me, and I won't name names, that doing suspension that they only wanted the fork to compress 50%. They only wanted to use 50% of the stroke. They wanted it that stiff. And it's kind of like you didn't know how to communicate. Like, you just can't do that. The fork has to work. The fork's made to absorb 12, 13 inches of travel. You want to use the whole stroke. It's just hard to break that down to someone that, doesn't know.
Did you let them try it?
We did. I have video of it still. I saved, and the bike looked like a chopper, looked like a West Coast chopper going around the track at the time. Like the shock, it was actually overpowering the shock so bad that the shock was all the way down in the stroke, and the fork was fully extended around the whole track.
Oh my goodness. I bet it was a nightmare to turn. I don't know which rider it was, but whoever it was, I'm glad they didn't crash.
Yeah, you wouldn't be surprised if I told you who it was, but
I think I know who it is, but I don't want to blow him out or get you in trouble. I may say something later on, but I'm pretty sure I know who it was, and I don't. You didn't tell me, obviously, but I do know. Who is your favorite rider to work with?
man, that's tough. Because I was pretty fortunate, like with Tommy. Like Tommy was awesome. Like Tommy Hahn, he actually bought me as a bonus. He actually bought me a bike the first year I worked for him because he knew how much I loved to ride. And it was kind of a funny story. Like we were at San Francisco Supercross in 2008, and he had this big watch on, this big bling watch that he had. And I kind of asked him about his watch, like what kind of watch is that? And he's like, I'll tell you what, if I get on the podium, I'll get you one. And Renee Zapata, who was on the team at the time, he's another guy in the industry. I think he's AMA now and doing some other stuff. But he was like, oh, JT doesn't want a watch. He wants a bike. And Tommy's like, okay, if I get on the podium tonight, I'll give you a bike, or I'll buy you a bike. And he got second that night and got me a Cowie 450.
Dude, that's cool. And it's funny because a lot of people, I think a lot of this has to do with Steve Mathis being such a dick to Tommy throughout his career. I
hated it, man. I hated it. That's one thing. Yeah, I agree with you.
I've never had any interaction other than hearing Mattress just talk about him. I don't know. He seems like a great guy to me.
Yeah, the whole family, Will, Tommy, his parents, it's all good family.
Why is Will so nice to Mattress?
I don't know. I've never understood that, honestly. And I love Will too. Good dude. So I don't know what's going on there, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know why that is and what the issue was with Tommy. But I know Tommy he wasn't afraid. He didn't really care who you were. He's kind of, or who you were, excuse me. He's just kind of one of those guys that would speak his mind, and certain guys don't like that, especially guys with egos. So
Yeah, see, I love guys like that. I want these guys to tell me, and if I'm out of line, tell me I'm out of line, and I'm cool with that. And yeah, I don't think Mattress appreciated that. And like I said, every interaction I've ever had with Tommy Hahn, and every interaction that anyone I know who's worked with him, they have nothing but glowing things to say. But I do think his reputation got smeared quite a bit, and I think it was bullshit.
yeah, I agree. And just such a talented rider, man. Like there were days where there's a few occasions where I can think Southwick, 2009. Or either '09 or 2010, where you just think like he was the fastest rider on the track. And you're talking Chad Reed, you're talking Ryan Dungey, like some badass dudes, Michael Lessie. He's the fastest guy on the track. And there was one particular race where he got a flat front tire. He ran over something in the dirt and DNF'd. But there was some races, man, where he was on. When he was on, he was on.
Yeah, I remember because I would watch, I checked the lap times and I was like, wow, Tommy Hunt, he would always put in these heater laps, but he didn't have, I don't know if it was endurance or if he was dealing with different injuries or what went on, but I think that, he was super talented.
Yeah, and for him, it was like the gnarlier the track was, the better. Like Seattle Supercross in 2010, he got second that night also. I think Wyndham won, Tommy second. The ruts were so gnarly in this track because it kind of rained before and they brought some sand in. The ruts were so gnarly. He was wheeling. If you go watch them, it's on YouTube. If you go back and watch it, he was wheeling before the triple to keep his pegs and his feet out of the ruts. That's how gnarly it was. And when the track's like that, that was when he was at his best. When the track was hard and dry, he was kind of like wasn't the best, He just excelled on those tracks that were rough like that and gnarly.
Yeah, he had a weird flow to him where he kind of stood up almost like a European style a little bit. I don't know if you'd call it that, but yeah. So how long did you end up staying at Honda?
So Honda, I was there, let's see here, first year, 2013. And I was there through when they signed Kenny, actually, in 2017. And we all know how that ended up, not very well. He crashed third race and he was out for the season, but that ugly crash he had.
Yeah. So, dear Lord, you were the suspension guy then?
So I was a test mechanic there and chassis guy, and then I would actually help with suspension. So mainly with KYB, I would go there and we would all build suspension together and like involved in all the testing and, building stuff at the track. So yeah, KYB, we had KYB and show at the time, which is kind of unique. Like at Honda, they kind of gave you the choice to run whatever you wanted,
Can you explain that and why that's a big deal with the Japanese factory and why some teams run KYB and Showa? And it's like, why is that?
So I think with Honda, the production motorcycle comes with Showa, so they wanted to try to get that on the bike, but they did just give you the choice. I think it's the way it started. We were Showa, and I think Trey Kennard, if I remember this right, Trey Kennard tested the KYB air fork. It was a PSF1 air fork back in 2014, and he was literally 2 seconds a lot faster on that fork, on that KYB fork. So it's one of those things. That's kind of how that started, because before it was all Showa. And when he was 2 seconds faster, there's something here. They tested with Tomac, and Tomac said, no, I want to stick with what I have. And they went to Unadilla the next race. I actually built that bike because Brent Presnell, who was Trey's mechanic, his wife was pregnant. They were having a baby. So I got to step in as Trey's mechanic for, I think it was 3 or 4 races. And he won the last race, which was Unadilla. And it was kind of funny once he beat Tomac. I think he won both motos, I believe. And when he beat Tomac, all of a sudden Tomac's like, okay, maybe I should try that air fork. And he had it on there was a break, and then Tomac had it on his bike 2 weeks later. Yeah,
I remember that season. Trey finished out with like 2 or 3 wins at the end of the season. He was really good.
I think he only had one.
Was it one? But he was he got way better towards the end.
Yeah, he was on the podium. It just 3rd or 4th at least, like every moto seemed like he was pretty legit. But yeah, I think that was the year Kenny won on the KTM. He was pretty unstoppable on that thing. So, and Dungey, actually, they're both up front.
Okay, so when Roczen has his big crash, and I'm sure it was awful at the team. His dad's notoriously hard to deal with. And he's come out and done some interviews saying that Honda wouldn't give Kenny some of the stuff they gave Chase. Did it get real weird after that? Did they blame the bike?
So when I was there, his dad wasn't that involved. I think they maybe came to a race or two, but they weren't very involved back then. So I didn't really have much experience with that. But it's kind of funny, like when I was personally, I don't want to say intimidated, but when Kenny was coming to the team, I mean, we revamped that team when Kenny was coming, and we got a new semi. Like Dan wanted everything just like basically reconstructed. Like I was building start gates for the test track. I actually built, because I did some welding and fabrication also. So we were just doing a bunch of stuff for Kenny to come along. And when he came along, he was actually surprisingly so laid back. I was like, a guy of that caliber, I was surprised at the time before his crash. Once he crashed and all that stuff happened, not so much. I can imagine why. Like once you have an incident like that, it's probably tough to even get back on the bike, let alone trust everyone around you, trust your suspension, trust, this or that. So I think after that, like I said, I left at the end of that year, but I think there was some stuff where he brought like his personal suspension guy from Germany over, and he's kind of pulling the strings over at Honda. I was kind of like watching that, just going like, wow, you don't see that every day.
Yeah. And I think I remember when Kenny was before that, he had that reckless abandon, that kind of almost like a 250 rider send it attitude. And, we were talking about the horrible consequences. He got to taste those. And once he tasted those, I just don't know that he was ever willing to go back to that edge. And whenever he felt slightly uncomfortable, now he backs off.
Yeah, and it's tough. And like you said, I think it was a miracle he's even able to ride after that crash he had. And then the next year, we know what happened with Cooper Webb, that whole incident. And I couldn't imagine I'd probably be a head case too if I did get back on the bike, So that's why this year I'm kind of pulling for him. I don't know if it's maybe he's maybe out of touch with the title right now, but he's kind of like still in there, just having a pretty good season. So
yeah, it's hard not to listen, I give him crap because I don't really like him as a person and I've had my own issues with him, but you cannot disrespect what he's done. Like the dude is so talented. And you can't tell me that Suzuki frame and everything is on par. I think it's adjustable, and I think he likes that. And he's so good, he can overcome its shortcomings because he is so talented.
For sure. Yeah, you take that DNF out that he had, and I think he'd be points leader right now, or pretty close to it. So
yeah, it changes everything. He'd be right in the mix. But yeah, I saw that, and it was unfortunate. But I mean, he did thread the needle. He should have waited till after the sand. So
yeah, that was surprising.
Yeah, but that was the one time he decides to go for it, and it eats his lunch. Okay, so now you're in Utah. You got all these RMX racers, and those tracks are gnarly. They try and leave those rough so that the guys that go pro, and there's been a lot of good riders out of Utah. If I'm riding in the RMX series and I say, hey, Jason, what's one thing I can do on my bike to make my suspension work better?
So what I did is I raced Thanksgiving Classic at Mesquite. Over the weekend, I raced also at Delta, and I just kind of I stiffened up my bike a little bit just to help keep. I always think about your feet in the ruts. You know what I mean? Like if a jump face is rutted and the bike's bottoming out and you're dragging the foot pegs, that's pretty dangerous and it's slowing you down. So I stiffened the bike up. Definitely check your sag. Like a lot of people don't check their sag. I get it all the time. These modern motorcycles are so they could just benefit a lot by being properly set up, like sag, fork heights, and all that. But sag is number one. And once you check your sag, like when you adjust your chain, as you move that axle back, it puts more leverage on the shock. And so you want to keep an eye on that sag. You don't want to just say, I set my sag, 3 months ago and call it good. So that's number one. And then I think at Mesquite, when the track was a little bit softer, I kind of went with a little bit slower rebound. But this weekend at Delta, when the track was drier and choppier, I opened up the rebound front and rear. So it just kind of lets those wheels stay in contact with the ground. Like if your tires aren't on the ground, you can't brake, you can't accelerate. So to keep contact with the ground, you want to keep an eye on rebound. And just, with these bikes, we pay so much money for these bikes. And part of what we pay for is the technology of all the clickers, high speed, low speed, compression, and, rebound. And I get so many riders that I'll do their suspension and when they come back for service, their clickers are right where I put them. And when I go to the track, I'm always click. I have settings written down for every track I go to, and it's kind of like a base setting. Like I go here, and then if the track is muddier or drier or whatever it is, I'll tune from there. But just utilize your clicker adjustments, and like I said, always check your sag. Keep an eye on that sag number.
Yeah, the sag, I crack up. I see so many people talking about their suspension and getting it done. I'm like, well, what's your sag? They're like, I don't know. I'm like, oh my God, you can't judge suspension unless you at least have your sag set.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And then when it comes to clickers, what if there's a kid that's trying to learn how to set his bike up? And my dad did this with me, and tell me if this is a good idea or a bad idea. Would you tell him like, hey, turn the rebound all the way in, let them do a couple laps, turn it all the way out, just so they know what it does?
You can. I don't know if I'd go all the way closed. But you could, like what I've been doing lately is because I've always heard like, oh, I just don't change too much at once, go one click at a time. But what I've been doing is I'll do 4 clicks at a time, and you like, you don't think you'll feel that. You'll feel 4 clicks if you try it. But when you do it, don't just go 4 clicks in and then you go to the next track, 4 clicks in, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, you're like 3 or 4 clicks out and you don't realize it. You got to kind of keep an eye and just maybe keep a notepad or written down somewhere, or even on a piece of duct tape on your toolbox of where your clickers are, and you'll benefit from it. And that's what I like. Kind of a pet peeve I have with a lot of like motocross trainers is they'll teach you how to ride your bike, teach you all the techniques, teach you this, teach you that. But if you don't have a bike that's handling properly, it doesn't matter what technique you have.
Yeah, see that, and that's the thing about motocross though, is there are those talents like Jet Lawrence. I think you can put him on a piece of crap and he finds a way to make it work. And it's not like I used to race go-karts, and if you missed your setup, you got beat by someone with half your talent. It's blessing and a curse in our sport that you can make up for a lot. But yeah, if you get it dialed in, it's such an advantage.
Yeah, and that's what was kind of going when I think of like I'm kind of out of the loop on Jet Lawrence. He was an amateur when I was at Geico, but our guy was Christian Craig. He was hard to test with because he could ride anything. He could ride a piece of crap that wasn't even set up right, and he just made it look beautiful. He was just one of those guys.
Yeah, and it's funny watching Hunter and Jet on the same bike. When it's dialed in, they both ride good. When it's not, Jet rides good and Hunter sucks because he can overcome it. It's kind of funny how that is. So, and the other thing that I know people they don't put enough emphasis on this. How often do you change the suspension fluid?
I would say, so it's like standard, like 30 hours just to keep it fresh. But with pro guys, I would say 20 to 25 hours. Because when you get the pro guys, or even a guy that's really heavy, the first thing that I see that wears is the bushing inside of your shock. That definitely rides directly on the shock shaft. And that, in most cases, goes from like 10 to 15 hours. You start to see wear on that. And then the fluid obviously breaks down, shims kind of get weaker. There's a shock piston band that kind of acts as a piston ring in there. And there's O-rings that apply pressure to that piston band. When that shock gets hot, those O-rings get D-shaped and that piston band shrinks, and now you have oil blowing by and you lose damping in that shock. So if I replace that shock piston band and rebuild everything properly, like it should feel like a brand new motorcycle.
Yeah, it's crazy. I remember the first time I never did my suspension fluid, and then Mike at MB1's, dude, what are you doing? I did it. And I was like, wow, it's like a brand new bike. I'm like,
it's crazy.
You don't need a new bike. You just need suspension fluid.
Absolutely. And keep your shock linkage. I think it's primarily Yamahas that the linkage bearings like get really dry and like rust. And if that stuff's not moving freely, it doesn't matter how good your shock is, because those things have to work together. So we'll kind of wrap this up. I'll let you get back to work.
What advice would you have for a guy that wants to become a race mechanic or wants to become a racer? You got any advice for the next generation?
Oh boy. So as far as race mechanic, a lot of it, man, is like who you know. Like I used to think like, oh, I'll go to MMI and they'll place you on a team or whatever. Like that happens very rarely. A lot of it is just getting to the races, being in Southern California and just knowing people like I did, get a job at suspension shops, or whether it's Race Tech or it's RG3 or Pro Circuit. That's a door there. But it is tough, but at the same time, it's not as tough as you think it would be to get on a team. But you got to have, you got to be somewhat, look presentable and like kind of like, like kind of act the part and be at the, like I said, be at the tracks, be around the people, and you never know what doors are going to open.
Yeah. And then what would you tell a young rider trying to become a pro?
That's a tough one because it's
That's like
it's
an
not just
episode in itself.
what's that?
That's like a full episode in itself.
Yeah, it's such a tough, like, it's like that 1% of people make it, and a fraction of those people make money. I think, a lot of people are just racing because they love it and they're making a decent living, but they're not getting rich and they're certainly not set for life. So it's tough, but I always say that you'll never know unless you try. Like, if you don't try, you're never going to make it. But you got to kind of keep it within perspective.
Yeah. So you worked in the industry and you kind of entered when the promoters weren't making as much money as they are now. You were inside these teams. Do they ever talk about like, hey, how much are the promoters making? Can they kick back to the teams? Why in the hell won't they speak up?
Yeah, that's tough, man. I can't speak to that because it's kind of funny. Like, no, people don't really talk about money as much as you think. Like, as far as riders, bonus money and contracts and stuff like that. I think I worked at Honda, and I don't even know how much money we got for our budget. It's just like that stuff is kind of like you don't need to know kind of deal. So they're very secretive about stuff like that. So it's hard to speak on stuff like that.
Yeah, and I guess everyone kind of does their own thing and they do their own job and they don't worry about it. Meanwhile, the promoters are about to sign a $200 million a year contract and the riders and teams get shit.
Yeah, and I know one thing I can speak to is it is funny to me how everybody, even like whether it was Ken Roczen or Chase Sexton, like they pay to race. They have to pay, like past champions pay to race. You go to drag racing, they pay you to qualify. Like if you make the show, I think it was like $10,000 that the team gets to start, which doesn't even pay for a run. You get paid for every round you make because you are the show. Without 16 cars in the field, they don't have the show. So they pay the show. So it makes sense that Supercross should be doing the same.
Yeah, and I always just call it a big exhibition because it's not a professional sport. Professional sports pay back. Football players don't pay entry fees, and there's a couple sports that do. I think NASCAR pays entry fees, but you're guaranteed money once you're in the show. It's just different, but it's frustrating for me. I just don't understand why these guys like Roger DeCoster, Dan Bentley when he was in there, why these guys won't speak up, or they just. I think they're just focused too hard on their jobs.
Yeah, maybe, and they're kind of the face of the of management of the team or team manager or whatever, but there's people above them pulling their strings as well, especially at that corporate level. And I don't know if there's something going on there where they have direct, relations with the promoters and stuff like that going on. But I know like sometimes when you're racing, it's just like everybody has their job and everyone goes through the motions. And then when the race is over, everybody goes to the airport and flies home and you do it again next week. And sometimes you're so focused on what you're doing and always chasing that deadline that some of that stuff that's always been the same just doesn't change because nobody speaks up. So
yeah, and that's why they hate me so bad is because I'm pointing out the fact of what money is available. Because it's funny because I talked to a couple of these team managers. I'm like, you realize how much money is available? They're like, no, Series doesn't make anything. I'm like, no. And I show them the numbers and I show them the contracts and they're like, oh, really? Yeah, it's alarming that they don't know that, but
no, that's great. And I will say, like, I appreciate your channel because you say what's on your mind and you don't care what people think about it. And I kind of wish more people were like that,
I think the sport would be held a lot more to accountability if people weren't stuck in this whole get along to go along mentality. And listen, people are afraid. Look what they've done to me. They banned me from the races for talking about this stuff.
That's nuts, man.
But that's the climate. But oh well, it is what it is. I understand. So, all right, my man. Hey, have you tried Nano Xtreme yet?
No, but I could use some because I've blown out both my shoulders. I'm recovering from a rotator cuff right now, and I keep meaning to order some of that stuff. So.
You don't need to order it. You send me your address after this. Anyone that comes on the show, we hook up with Nano Xtreme. So I'll send you Xtreme. And thank you for your time. Anything else you want to share with people? And where can they go? Can people send their suspension to you, or do they have to live in St. George?
Yeah, no, absolutely. If you call or email me, you can ship your stuff in just so I know it's coming. And then we're in Hurricane, Utah, and we offer, like I said, suspension, revalve, rebuilds, engine services, parts and accessories, and you'll see them at, I'm on tracks on the West Coast, whether it's Washington, California, Utah. I still ride quite a bit. So yeah, if you ever see me at the track, I have a white Sprinter, and just feel free to come up and yeah, I'll check your sag for you and make sure you're all good.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jason. I appreciate everything. And yeah, we'll check in back with you at the end of the year. Let me know how this RMX series goes. And I think you're going to be a big hit over there. And I think you'll appreciate this. We got a strong region of riders in that area. That, like I said, we got some stars coming out of there.
Yeah, that's what I heard. I heard a couple of years ago at Loretta's, there were 72 riders, I believe, that went to Loretta's that were from the RMX series. So, I actually took a training class from Grassroots. It was Preston Kilroy and Riley Bruff that put the class on, and just the kids that train. There was like a 15 or so kids that I can hold my own speed wise, but these kids, man, like there was a 14-year-old girl in the class that was like going into deep ruts, standing up with her feet on the pegs, no brakes. I'm just like, I can't even do that, you know. So it's just teaching that safe way to ride and the talent. And that's where it starts, man. Just like, it's not all about going as fast as you can go and hanging it out. You got to be able to get through your career safely. That's what you want to do. So
Yeah, and that Bruff family does a hell of a job. I don't even like riding a Mesquite because I show up and I feel like I'm at a factory practice. The way those kids go around me, it's crazy.
yeah, it's gnarly. And the track was gnarly.
It's so gnarly. So, all right, brother. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and I will catch you later.
All right, Chris, thanks a lot for having me on again. Appreciate it.